Welcome back to Chess Tactic Today. In round 11 of the FIDE Grand Swiss 2025, it's Anish Giri versus Hans Niemann, two fighters both hungry for victory. Giri kicks off with the English opening, quickly trading pieces before steering the game into a tense middle game full of maneuvering. Niemann pushes back with sharp knight jumps, but Giri takes control, breaking through with pawn storms and precise calculation. This one is a masterclass in patience turning into power, and Giri walks away with a clean victory. With this win, Anish Giri not only defeats Niemann, but also secures first place in the Open tournament outright. And if you caught my recent video on Hans Niemann's brilliancy spree back in round 7, you'll know just how sharp he's been. But today, it's Giri who claims the spotlight. And we're off. Giri opens with the English, pawn to c4. This is a flexible positional opening, aiming to control the center from the flank rather than occupying it directly. Niemann responds with knight to f6, one of the most solid and popular replies. He's not committing his central pawns just yet, waiting to see what white does. Giri develops his queenside knight to c3, adding more pressure on the d5 square. This is standard development, building a solid foundation. And now Niemann stakes his claim in the center with pawn to e5. This transposes the game into a sort of reversed Sicilian, where the classic battle for control of the d4 square will be key. Knight to f3 from Giri. This move develops a piece and immediately puts a question to Black's e5 pawn, a very natural and strong move. Niemann defends the pawn with his own knight to c6. We are now in a four knights English, a setup known for its rich strategic complexity. Giri plays the quiet pawn to e3. This prepares to develop his light-squared bishop and solidifies his center, getting ready to fight for the d4 square. In response, Niemann plays bishop to b4, pinning the knight on c3. This is a very active move, putting immediate pressure on white's position. Giri breaks the pin with queen to c2. This move serves two purposes. It defends the knight and prepares to recapture on c3 with the queen, keeping his pawn structure intact. And Niemann decides to cash in right away. Bishop takes knight on c3. This is a huge strategic decision. Black gives up the bishop pair, but in return, he saddles white with doubled c-pawns. Giri recaptures, queen takes c3. Now we see the trade-off. White has the two bishops, a long-term advantage, but those doubled pawns could become a target later. A classic strategic imbalance. Niemann develops his queen to e7, defending the e5 pawn and preparing to connect his rooks. A very sensible move. Giri plays pawn to a3. This little move prevents any annoying knight or bishop, jumps to the b4 square, and prepares to expand on the queen side himself. There it is. Niemann strikes in the center with pawn to d5. He's not waiting around. He wants to open up the position and challenge white's central control. And Giri meets him head-on. Pawn to d4. The central tension is immediately resolved. This often leads to a series of exchanges that clarifies the direction of the game. Niemann captures, pawn takes d4. He's happy to simplify the center, believing his active pieces will give him good chances. Giri recaptures with knight takes d4. The knight now occupies a beautiful central post. Niemann immediately trades it off, knight takes knight. He doesn't want that strong knight sitting in the middle of the board. This simplification continues. Queen takes d4. White's queen is now centralized, but it's also a potential target. The game is still very balanced. And just as we said, Niemann kicks the queen with pawn to c5. This move not only gains time, but also solidifies his control over the d4 square. Giri retreats his queen to h4. An interesting choice. From here, the queen eyes Black's kingside and stays out of the way of the central action. Niemann develops his bishop to e6. Controlling key squares and preparing to get his rooks into the game. All very logical. Giri captures on d5, continuing the simplification process. He seems to be aiming for a calm endgame where his bishop pair might shine. Niemann recaptures with the knight. Now Black's knight is active, and the position is getting clearer and clearer. We are heading towards an endgame. Giri plays bishop to b5 with check. This forces a response and aims to trade off more pieces, steering the game into that desired endgame. Niemann calmly blocks with bishop to d7, offering the trade. He isn't afraid of the simplification. And there's the big one. Giri plays queen takes queen with check. The queens are coming off the board. From this point on, it's all about endgame technique. Knight takes queen. The dust has settled. We have a rook and bishop versus a rook and knight endgame. The position looks dead equal, but in the hands of a player like Giri, small advantages can be nurtured. Giri tucks his bishop back to e2. It's a quiet move, just repositioning his piece to a safe and flexible square. Niemann activates his rook on the c-file, putting some pressure on white's doubled pawns. This is black's most obvious plan. Giri plays pawn to f3. This move prepares to bring his king towards the center and provides a solid support point for the e4 pawn. Niemann mirrors the idea with pawn to f6, also creating space for his king. Both players are following classic endgame principles. The king comes to f2. In the endgame, the king is a fighting piece, and Giri is bringing his into the action. And Niemann does the same. Both kings are marching towards the center, ready to join the battle. Giri brings his rook to the d-file, the only fully open file on the board, a very strong positional move. Niemann develops his bishop to e6, challenging white's control of the d-file and keeping his position solid. A subtle move here from Giri, pawn to h4. He's gaining a little bit of space on the king side, restricting black's pieces. These small moves can add up. Niemann solidifies his queenside with pawn to b6. He's making sure there are no weaknesses for white to attack. Giri advances with pawn to e4, grabbing more central space and activating his bishop. He's slowly trying to build pressure. Niemann repositions his knight to c6, where it eyes the key d4 and b4 squares. The maneuvering phase continues. Bishop to e3 from Giri, a solid developing move that supports his center and prepares to challenge black on the d-file. Niemann's knight hops to the a5 square on the edge of the board. From here, it puts pressure on white's b3 pawn and queenside structure. This knight will become a key character in our story. Giri puts his rook on the aggressive d6 square. It's an outpost, restricting black's pieces and creating threats. The tension is slowly building. Niemann brings his other rook to e8, a useful move, preparing to contest the open files. And now Giri starts a pawn storm on the king side with g4. This is ambitious. He's trying to create a second front and destabilize black's king position. The knight on a5 was a little loose, so Niemann moves it back to b7, driving the rook away from d6. A good defensive maneuver. The rook retreats to d2. Giri is forced back for a moment, but his plans are still in motion. And Niemann's knight returns to a5. The players are repeating moves, testing each other. It feels like the quiet before the storm. Giri repeats as well with rook to d6. Is this heading for a draw? Or is one player lulling the other into a false sense of security? Niemann repeats again with knight to b7. He seems content with a draw, but Giri has other ideas. Giri breaks the repetition, moving his rook to d1 instead of d2. A tiny change, but it signals he wants to play on. Niemann's knight is back on a5. He's sticking to his plan, putting pressure on the queen's side. Giri brings his other rook to c1. He's regrouping his forces, preparing for a decisive moment. The real fireworks are coming soon. Niemann improves his king position, moving it to e7. It looks solid, but things are about to get very sharp. Giri places his bishop on a6, a fantastic square. It puts immense pressure on black's queenside and prepares to attack the c-pawn. Niemann challenges on the d-file, offering a rook trade. He wants to relieve some of the pressure. Giri accepts the trade. Rook takes rook. This seems to simplify, but it's actually part of a deeper plan. Rook takes back. Now we have one rook each. The position still feels balanced, but Giri has something up his sleeve. Here we go. Giri plays pawn to b4, directly challenging the knight on a 5 sphere of influence and seeking to break open the queenside. Niemann's knight hops to b3, a fantastic square where it attacks the rook on c1 and puts pressure on white's position. This looks like a great move for black, but it steps right into a tactical storm. Giri moves his rook to c3, attacking the knight. It seems like a simple move, but it's setting up the final combination. Watch this square. Niemann plays rook to d6, defending his position and preparing to cause trouble. But he's missed the thunderbolt that's about to strike. First, the preliminary pawn capture. Pawn takes c5. This opens the lines for what's coming next. Niemann recaptures, his position looks fine. The knight is a hero on b3. But Giri has seen deeper. Boom! Rook takes knight on b3. An absolutely stunning exchange sacrifice. Giri gives up his rook for the knight, a move that looks insane at first glance, but it completely shatters black's coordination and opens the floodgates for his bishop. Niemann has no choice but to accept. Bishop takes rook. He's up the exchange, but suddenly his position is collapsing. Giri's follow-up has to be precise. And there it is! Bishop takes pawn on c5. This is the point. The bishop is now an absolute monster, slicing across the board, attacking the rook on d6, and completely dominating the position. What a transformation! The king is forced to move to d7 to defend the rook. Niemann is in pure survival mode now, but it's not enough. And the final blow of the combination. Bishop takes rook on d6. Giri wins his material back, and then some. The smoke has cleared, and white is left with a winning endgame. King takes bishop. It's now an endgame of bishop versus bare pawns. This is a technical win for white, but the conversion still requires care. Giri immediately starts to work with g5, creating a passed pawn and further weakening black's structure. This is a masterclass in converting an advantage. Niemann's bishop retreats to e6. He's trying to set up a blockade, but white's pieces are too active. The white king marches forward to e3. It's heading into the heart of black's position to support the passed pawns. Niemann activates his own king, hoping for counterplay. But it's a desperate measure. Giri's king continues its relentless advance to f4. It's unstoppable. Black's king tries to get in front of the pawns, but it's too late. Pawn takes pawn on f6. White now has a dangerous passed f-pawn. Recapturing is forced, but now the h-pawn is a target. Giri pushes on the other side of the board with a 4, fixing black's pawns and creating another weakness. Niemann stops the white pawn from advancing further on the king side, but his position is hopeless. Another pawn push, a 5. Giri is tightening the screws, leaving black with no good moves. The bishop shuffles back to d7, but it's just delaying the inevitable. Giri improves his bishop to e2, preparing for the final breakthrough. Niemann's king is active, but it's fighting a losing battle. This is it, the final breakthrough. Pawn to e5. This move rips open the position, creating a clear path for white's king and sealing the deal. A powerful and decisive pawn break. Black's king tries to get back, but it's too far away to stop the coming storm. Pawn takes pawn. Now white has a passed f-pawn that is sprinting for the end zone. The king has to go after the pawn, but this is exactly what Giri wanted. And the elegant final touch, pawn to f7, a brilliant decoy. This pawn sacrifices itself to lure the black king away, allowing white's king to march in and clean up. Just beautiful. King takes pawn, and after white's king simply walks to e5, the game is over. The white king will now mop up black's remaining pawns, and there is nothing Niemann can do. What a phenomenal display of tactical vision and endgame technique from Anish Giri. What a game! From a quiet, strategic opening to a brilliant mid-game sacrifice and a flawless endgame conversion. This match was a perfect story of patience, calculation, and creativity. Thanks for joining us on Chess Tactic today, and we'll see you next time.